morning, everybody. Welcome to The Heart. I'm so glad that you guys are here today. And for those of you that don't know me very well, you will see that I am very nervous. And this isn't normal for me, but it is today. So just enjoy the ride with me. I'm feeling uncertain, and I think it's going to be good because then you'll be able to see the rawness and the realness of what it means to be uncertain, because I am walking that out as in live time as you see it. So today I want to speak with you guys about what it looks like to be uncertain. And I think a part of our humanity believes that whenever we have an aha moment, that means that we have found all of the answers. Or that something happens and it substantiates what we already thought was going to happen, and so we're like, I knew that was true. And we find a lot of things that happen in our life that kind of validate what we were already thinking. At least if you don't do that, I do that. I'm like, oh, I knew Dom was going to say that. Sometimes we get home and I just know in my head, Dom's going to do something, and I'm going to like find all the things to validate something that he did. And it's usually really good things. He does the laundry, he does the dishes. Like, my husband is so wonderful. When I go home and that's not done, I'm like, ugh, great. I knew he wasn't going to do that, even though I know he always does do it. So what I want to focus on today is what happens to you, what happens to me, and to us in our faith whenever we become uncertain. And I was looking at a story in the Bible that you guys may or may not be familiar with, but it's about Peter, one of the disciples, and his journey of faith. And this is what we're going to do, is we're just going to kind of microscope a moment in his life and see what that looks like in real time and how that applies to us in the here and now. So if you want to follow me, open your Bibles if you have them. There's a Church Center app that we have as well, and there's like a live event on the Bible app where you can follow along with the message here. But I'm going to be in Matthew 14, 22 through 30. And I'm going to read it from the screen here. Go ahead, Lance. As soon as the meal was finished, so this is just so you guys know where we're picking up in the story. Jesus was like out doing all these miracles, and a bunch of crowds were following him around, and he was making an impact in the world around him. And right as soon as this, one of his largest miracles that people know about, take place, where he feeds 5,000 people, he decides to leave and get away, and the disciples are going across the sea to somewhere else. So that's where we're picking up the story here. So it says, as soon as the meal was finished, he insisted that the disciples get in the boat and go on ahead to the other side while he dismissed the people. And with the crowd dispersed, he climbed the mountain. That's saying Jesus. He climbed the mountain so he could be by himself and pray, and he stayed there alone late into the night. Meanwhile, the boat was far out at sea when the wind came up against them, and they were battered by the waves. And by them, it means the disciples. I don't know how many. I doubt it was 12, because it seems like a tiny boat in the story, but I don't know. I could be making all of that up. But some disciples were in this boat. They're going across the sea. And about 4 o'clock in the morning, Jesus came toward them walking on the water, and they were scared out of their wits. A ghost, they said, crying out in terror. And this is where I want us to hover for the rest of the 20 minutes or so that we have together. It says, but Jesus was quick to comfort them. Courage, it's me, don't be afraid. And Peter, suddenly bold, said, Master, if it's really you, come call me to come to you on the water. And he said, come ahead. And jumping out of the boat, Peter walked on the water to Jesus. But when he looked down at the waves churning beneath his feet, he lost his nerve and started to sink. And he cried, Master, save me. And this is what I want to focus on for the rest of our time together. That, have you ever had a moment in your life, and maybe you're in the middle of it now, or maybe it's something you've experienced in the past or that you will see in the future. But have you had a moment in your life so far where you've been so suddenly bold and filled with courage, and just as you make a decision, and in the very next breath, in the very next moment, you've lost your nerve, and you start to feel like you maybe made the wrong decision? And I've been there, and I'm sure a lot of us have been there. And if you haven't been yet, I know that there's moments in our life that this will happen. Because what we see so far, and what I've heard this story be told before, is that everybody talks about how brave Peter was whenever he stepped out on the water. Like, maybe he lost a little bit of his faith, but at least he took a step out there. And maybe that's true, but what I want to focus on today is maybe a different perspective of this, to be able to see that Peter didn't lose his faith, he just lost his nerve. He was bold, and it says that he jumped out of a boat. And whenever we jump out of something, it means we're stepping into something else. And what Peter did was he stepped out in his boldness, but then he quickly also stepped into uncertainty. And for here it says he lost his nerve and he started to sink. So let's pray before we dive into this a little bit more. God, I thank you so much today that you help us understand what it looks like to have faith and uncertainty at the same time. Lord, I pray that for every single one of us here that we can leave inspired to live a life full of risk and adventure in the middle of our uncertainty. Lord, I thank you for bringing each of us here today, and I pray that we would be able to find boldness today. And for those of us that need courage, Lord, I pray that you would give it. We love you. In your name I pray, amen. So I wanted to tell you guys a little bit about me, a little tiny section of just a little bit of my life and what uncertainty has looked like for me. And I grew up in church, and I have parents that started to kind of follow Jesus at a younger age. My mom was 16 whenever she had my older sister. She was 18 when she had me. And when they were about 8 months pregnant is when my parents found Jesus. There was a Jehovah's Witness that came to their house and knocked on the door, and they had this radical encounter with God, and their faith evolved, and they brought all of us up in a Christian home. And we were very much forced to live in a Christian home. So it wasn't, hey guys, we want to go to church. It was, we are getting up and we are going to church. And, this is the Bible, and we're going to read from it every night, and we're going to pray every night. And we grew up in such a space that my parents were associate pastors at a church. And one of the, and this may not be for every church, but in my experience growing up, for me, any doubt or uncertainty that I had in my walk with Jesus was seen as a violation of my salvation. So I don't know if you guys have been there, but you've been in a place where you believed in God and all of a sudden you had a little bit of a doubt, or maybe you started to question some things, and everybody that's in the church for me was like, oh, you don't believe that happened? Are you sure you're saved? And uncertainty was not something that was embraced in the community that I grew up in. It wasn't safe to question my faith. It wasn't safe to be uncertain. And in the moments where I felt such complete uncertainty, I ended up abandoning a little bit of my faith because I felt like it was wrong to question anything. Have you guys ever been there, maybe in a church or maybe in a small group or around a bunch of people that also believe in Jesus, and you're kind of expressing that you're having a hard time, or maybe you're not like all in at the moment? You know what I'm talking about? Where you're like, man, you're having a good time, and then all of a sudden you're not having as good of a time, and everyone's like, oh, just keep having faith. God's going to get you through it. And that happened a lot to me. And every time I had a bit of uncertainty, it was just a violation. It was a violation of what people saw as what a true Christian should be like. And that was very difficult for me. It was very difficult for me because I don't know if I'd say I'm a skeptic, but I'm a thinker. I'm a major thinker. I will think the same thing for 5 days straight and have 50 different answers and then start all over again. And so growing up and growing up in a church where my parents were pastors, it was not safe to be uncertain about anything. And because I wasn't able and allowed to explore any uncertainty that I had in my faith, I never questioned my motives. I never questioned why I was doing what I was doing. I never questioned why certain things happened that didn't align with what I thought was supposed to happen. I didn't question it because I wasn't supposed to. That's what I was taught. Don't question that, you're not supposed to. And so when I take that time and I fast forward it to my adult life, there was a moment where I had ran straight into the face of uncertainty. My husband and I had been married. We were about 2 or 3 years into our marriage, and we caught each other at really odd times when we met. We were in total opposite sides of life. I was out in a free spirit and really had no care in the world. I would just swipe my credit card like money was unlimited, and I was very much just like, living life however And all up into that moment when I met Dom, my journey of faith looked pretty consistent as far as I never believed that God never existed or anything like that. I had moments where I walked away from church because I had a hard time with what I was experiencing in church. I didn't feel embraced or empowered to live in a little bit of uncertainty. And so I loved God, and I put the church on a break. I don't know if you guys have ever done that either, where you're like, hey, I'm still believing God and I'm still all about my faith, but I'm not about this church thing right now. And that was me for a bit. And so when I met Dom, I was just coming out of that. Dom is fresh out of a divorce. I don't know how many months divorced he was. And when we met, it was like a movie. We fell in love quickly. We got married 8 months later, and a couple years after that, we decided to add on to our family because Corbin was 3 when Dom and I, 2 or 3 when Dom and I married. And so a couple years in, he was about 5, we wanted to add on to our family. And Dom's talked about this before, and I'm not going to go into all the details, but essentially what happened with that was we had tried for years to get pregnant and were unsuccessful. We either didn't have viable pregnancies or it didn't work for a certain time, and it was very difficult. And leading up to this moment in my life, I'm looking at how I had experienced faith so far. So let's just say this is my beginning journey. Actually, the other way, because this feels backwards to me because I'm left-handed. So here we go. So this is where I started, and my journey starts going this way. And this whole time, even though I knew who God was and I believed that he was real, I wasn't allowed to question anything about God. That was my household. I'm not saying you guys have done that. I'm just talking about my issues, okay? So I wasn't allowed to doubt. I wasn't allowed to question anything. And I just kept keeping on because I loved God, and I believed that God was good, and I believed that he was real, and I believed he was powerful, and that he was the God of miracles, and he was a redeemer, and he was all of these things. And I still believed that even when I was questioning what was happening in my life, I still held on to the belief that God was all of these things. Then you find me in this moment where my husband and I are getting married, we're trying to have a family, and all of a sudden, everything about the essence of who I believed God to be, the God of the universe, the God of the cosmos, everything that I believed about him shattered. I believed that God was good. I believed that if I prayed, he would answer prayers. I believed that God was there for me in the really hard times, and I saw it happen for other people. But in this moment, I didn't see it. All of a sudden, all of the certainty that I had about my faith was abandoned. Nothing that was happening to me or around me or for my family made sense, because who I thought God was and what I saw happening did not match up. Have you ever been there where you were so sure of who God is or what he's going to do? You were so sure that you made the right decision. You felt like it was the decision that God told you to make, and then it doesn't work out. And you become so uncertain because for a moment, like Peter, you were certain, you were bold, and you jumped out of the boat and you jumped into a life of adventure, and then all of a sudden you lose your nerve and you're uncertain about what you're doing. And that's what I'm talking about today. I'm not talking about losing your faith because you're uncertain. That doesn't happen. I'm talking about questioning some things in the middle of uncertainty and still also having hope at the same time. You don't have to have one and not the other. They can work together. They can work in tandem. And for us today, I want to be able to see, first identify, is there a problem or a situation that's polluting your life right now? Is there something that you believed so strongly in, and now all of a sudden you've lost your nerve in the middle of this decision? Maybe you're new to your faith. Maybe you're new to this church thing, and all of a sudden something happens that makes you uncertain about giving this a try. We're trying out this new church, and it's doing this and that, and you feel really good about it, and then all of a sudden Dom says something, or I say something, or there's a song that's saying, or somebody doesn't shake your hand, and you're like, well, I don't know about this anymore. And I think what we do is we attach certainty to faith. We attach our certainty to a belief. We attach our certainty to an absolute. And whenever that doesn't match up anymore, we think that we're abandoning everything. That, because I'm having a question right now, because I'm uncertain of something, I no longer have faith. And what I want to argue, what I want to propose today is that you can be uncertain and still have faith. You can be uncertain and still find hope. You can be uncertain and continue on your journey and not have all the answers and still make progress. And I think that's what we do. That's what I've done, is I've seen in this moment when my husband and I couldn't have children of our own together, which was a lifelong dream of mine, all of the certainty that I had about who God was, and that he was a God that was a healer, that he was a God that provides, that he was a God that did all of these things for us, was not true to me. I could not see it. In a moment where I had believed God and who he was and what he was doing, and that he was a God of love, and he was a God of hope, and he was a God of provision, I saw all of these things growing up, and then I was shattered in a moment, because who I thought God was and who I believed him to be did not match up with what was happening in my life. And I think some of us have been there. Some of you maybe had a relationship with your parents that's broken. Maybe some of you are in a marriage that's hurting. Maybe some of you are injured. Your love is injured. Maybe some of you have friendships that are crumbling at your fingertips. I don't know what's happening in your life today. I don't know what type of injury you're coming in here with. I don't know what kind of uncertainty is in the front of your mind. But what I do know is that in the middle of your uncertainty, you can still embrace hope. What I do know, that in the middle of your uncertainty doesn't mean that you've lost your salvation. In the middle of your uncertainty doesn't mean that you can't continue to keep moving. Uncertainty can paralyze us. Uncertainty can cause us to disconnect from people. Uncertainty can cause us to disconnect from our faith. And what I want to encourage you to do today is to stay present. Stay in what you're doing. Embrace your uncertainty and continue to move on. There are situations in life that can violate the essence of who we believe God to be. There are situations in our life that can violate the essence of who we see God to be. And those are the moments that can really shake us, where we can lose our nerve. And I think something that maybe the church at Capital C as a whole has done is that they've said that if you've lost your nerve a little bit, that you've lost your faith. Have you ever been in a conversation with somebody and you're talking to them about like what a bad day you've had, and they say, but you know what? God is still good and he's going to provide. You ever been in that situation? I don't know if you can hear the sarcasm in my voice, but I'm telling you, I've wanted to punch people in the face when they told me that after I just lost, our second pregnancy. And there's scriptures that are throughout the Bible that we can see where God talks about some of us that are in the middle of uncertainty, where he speaks to those that are in the middle of sadness or being unsure. And he tells us how to be friends to the people that are hurting. He just says, open your ears and listen. He doesn't say to say something. He's just saying to be there with them. And sometimes I think for those of us that are people that are of faith, people that believe, that we feel like it's our job to convince people that they shouldn't be uncertain, that you shouldn't have any doubts, because God is still there for you. And maybe he is, but maybe we don't need to say that. We can just be that. I'm a big yoga person. I love being able to go onto a mat or go out onto the grass and just sit down and feel the warmth on my body and get my mind to be quiet and just be and sit there. And when I'm there is when I find the most peace with who I am and with who God is. I could see him around me. I can open my eyes in one breath and feel the oxygen in my lungs take on a whole new life. And I think that's what we can be for each other. That's why we're a body. Is that in the middle of our uncertainty, in the middle of us losing our nerve, that we can be still and we can hear somebody's pain. We can hear somebody's suffering. We can hear somebody's uncertainty and just be with them in that moment. It means so much to me when I come home and I have a bad day and I sit next to my husband and he doesn't say anything and he just sits next to me while I cry. It does so much for my soul to know that he's there for me in the middle of a bad day or in the middle of uncertainty that encourages me to move forward. And we can be that for each other. That's what a body is for. In the middle of us losing our nerve, what do? What I was thinking about as I was continuing and evaluating what it looks like to be uncertain, one thing I am certain of is that there's not an answer to uncertainty. If you live your life out of other people's experiences and take those as if they're the answers, then you're not going to experience the same thing. The way I deal with a problem may be completely different with how Dom deals with a problem. And I want to speak to this just for a second. In the times where I have been uncertain, I'm a problem solver. That's who I am. I am tenacious. If I see a problem, I'm going to find the reason why that problem started in the first place. I'm not just going to fix the problem. I'm going to go back and make sure that that problem never happens again. That's how I think. And one of the problems that I had in trying to map out this message for you and for me and for all of us is that I wanted to give you an answer of what you're supposed to do when you're uncertain. And I will give you an answer-ish. But the problem with it is that my uncertainty may not look like your uncertainty. And the answer to my uncertainty may not be the same answer for you. And if you choose to live your life through other people's experiences, then you're not really living your own life. If you're going through a hard time with your friendships and you go to a friend that just had a hard time in their friendships, maybe you can hear the pain that they were in, but it may not be the same kind of pain that you're currently in. And so you might try to solve the problem like they solved their problem, but it's not going to work for you because it's not the same problem. And it's the same thing with uncertainty. There's not one answer to what it looks like to get out of uncertainty. Sometimes we need to stay in uncertainty. Sometimes it's okay to be in uncertainty because when you step in it, you will eventually step out of it. And when you eventually step out of it, you will step in it again. It's an unending journey that we live in with uncertainty. So what I want you to leave here with today is to be able to find hope still in your uncertainty. It's when we become hopeless that it makes it hard to embrace the areas that we're in. But you can still be uncertain and have hope. You can still be uncertain and hold on to your faith. You've just lost your nerve. And that's what I love about the Message Bible. Can you throw that up really quick, Lance? The Matthew 14:22 through 30. The suddenly bold. Maybe you are here today and you're the first part of this, that you're in your suddenly bold phase. Maybe some of you are coming in here today certain of who you are, certain of who God is, certain of how he moves in your life, certain of how he breathes on your heart. And whenever you're in those moments of certainty, it's beautiful. I've been in those moments, and I feel like I'm like Jesus walking on the water. Like, no worries, guys. Got this. You need prayer. You need me to sit with you. You need whatever. And I'm like killing it, crushing being a good friend. And for those of you that are the first one, that are suddenly bold right now, then be bold and be there for people. And don't try to solve people's problems. Maybe just be in their problems with them. Give somebody hope. Be oxygen to somebody's soul around you. That's the easy part, and that's the fun part. And whenever you're in those moments, I would encourage you to just stay in that moment as much as you can and feel all of the feelings that you have, because it feels good to be able to help somebody around you and to be suddenly bold and encourage those and step out of a boat and jump onto the water. But for some of us, we're the second person, where we were at one point suddenly bold, and now we've lost our nerve, and we're uncertain. But in here, there's nothing in this that says, and Peter lost his nerve and now he was no longer a disciple. That's not there, because that didn't happen. Peter lost his nerve and he continued on. And he reached out for help and said, Master, save me. So for those of you that are uncertain today, for those of you that are having a hard time in the middle of your uncertainty, I want to encourage you to reach out. I want to encourage you to stay present in your situation, be true and authentic and genuine to who you are and to who God is. And just because you don't feel like God is a good God, just because you don't see that happening in your life in this moment, doesn't mean that it won't come again. I have been there. I have been so certain of who God was in my life. And in one moment, I became so uncertain of what I had given my whole life to. And that moment lasted for 3 years, solid. And it still comes up sometimes from day to day. It's not gone. Me being up here, I feel uncertain. I feel very unequipped to be talking to you about something that I still don't even have an answer to. But that's what I think is so beautiful about this, is that there's not an answer to uncertainty. It's a choice that we can make to remain in our faith, to remain moving forward in the midst of our uncertainty. I'm going to hand this over to Dom.
Okay. Thanks, man. Man, I feel like that message is powerful, and I want to just draw our attention again to something that Amber is saying is we are seemingly pulled between certain, or I'm not left-handed, so which way was certain? Is this certainty over here? Yeah, not even certain. We're pulled between certainty, we are sure, we know what we're doing, we know who God is, everything is good, and then we are pulled between this other thing of like, well, I prayed for someone to get healed and they died. I prayed for this job and somebody else got it. I prayed for this relationship and it's falling apart. I'm praying for my children and they're running away. And so these things that happen to us, they don't match up. They don't match up with what we are told should happen or what's supposed to happen. And we don't allow ourselves to be in the middle of that. It's either you're sure, or now you doubt God. You think God doesn't know. You think God forgot. You think God mistake. You think God doesn't see you. You think God doesn't hear you. And what we're afraid to say, what we're afraid to admit to ourselves sometimes is, and maybe it's not you. And I don't mean for us to come up here and put our issues on you. You know what I mean? Like, this is therapy. We're like, hey, you guys deal with it. Now it's yours. But maybe we can admit to ourselves sometimes that we're like, I don't know. I'm not sure. It doesn't seem like God heard me. It doesn't seem like God is seeing what is going on. It doesn't seem like God knows me, because if he knew me, he would know that this would have destroyed me. And so what do you do? What do you do when you are uncertain? When you have lost your nerve? When you don't want to doubt who God is, but you're not sure of why something is happening? And I think what we can do is choose. One of our core values at the heart is choice. We believe that choice is powerful. It's powerful. And here's why it is. Because if we trust God, if you trust God because he has proven himself trustworthy, then you are following the proof. What happens when the proof goes away? What happens if you believe something because it has been proven to you and all of a sudden the proof goes away? Well, now you can't believe it. How could you if you were following the proof? But if it is your choice to trust God, if it is your choice to walk in faith, then whether you are certain or uncertain, you are still choosing to put one foot in front of the other. You are still choosing to trust God in those moments, Because uncertainty will come. It will. If it hasn't yet, if you haven't experienced uncertainty, it probably means you've only known God for a couple of minutes. And then just give it a little bit longer and you'll experience some uncertainty. What we can do in that is choose. Choose faith. Choose trust. That's what makes it powerful. That is when your faith is your own. That's when your faith isn't something that you've been told to believe, something you've been told to say, something you've been told to understand. It becomes yours when you choose to trust God. Even if what happens doesn't look like what you expect it to happen. So if you could close your eyes for a moment real quick and bow your heads. I want to give you a challenge today, an opportunity for you to step into. Amber mentioned earlier that there was two types of people. They were both Peter in this story, but there's two types of people. One is you are bold. You are bold in what you believe. You are certain of who God is. You are bold in what God is doing in your life. And I'm telling you, we need you. We need your faith. We need your trust. We need your belief. We need you to be the oxygen in our lives when we doubt, when we are uncertain, when we are not sure. So if that describes you, if you feel bold in your faith right now, then you need to be the oxygen for the people around you. To let them borrow your faith. To pray for them, to believe with them, to sit with them in their sadness or their anger or their resentment or whatever it is they're going through. Sit with people, reach out to people and be there for them. But if the other part describes you where maybe you've lost your nerve and you're not sure right now and some things have been happening and life has been crazy and you're not really sure what is next, then I want to challenge you to reach out to people as well. Because what happens in this story is Jesus and Peter, they're walking on water, and Peter, he loses his nerve and he starts to sink, but you know what he does? He reaches out. He reaches out, and Jesus is immediately there. It says he immediately reaches for Peter. Reach out to the people around you. Reach out to God. And I want to challenge you this week to do that, to take a step. Even if you don't believe, even if you're uncertain, even if you're not sure, to take a step in that, to choose to take a step in your faith and in trust. So for those of you that feel bold, if you're ready to accept the challenge, to reach out to people, to be the oxygen for people in their life, then on the count of 3, I want you to raise your hand. And if you are feeling like you have lost your nerve a little bit, I want to give you a challenge, and I want you to raise your hand on the count of 3 if you can challenge yourself this week to take a step in faith, to choose to take that step. So if you're ready to take that challenge with me on the count of 3, put your hand up. 1, 2, 3. Both sets of people, put your hand up. This is a challenge you're taking for yourself. You're not going to report back to me. This is for you. Okay, put your hands down. Let's pray. God, we are so grateful for what you have given us. We're grateful to have your peace and your mercy. We're grateful to be able to be bold and step out and be there for the people around us. And we're grateful to be able to have a place to be uncertain, to not be sure, but still have the opportunity, the empowering opportunity to choose faith in you. So we thank you for the chance to do that today, God. We love you, and we pray that in Jesus' name.